What do you think would happen if Fiona, Madison, or Michael came across the Countess? Great question. I'm happy to get into it, but of course, please leave your thoughts in the comments as well, and let's go. So an interaction with Fiona and the Countess is something that has been brought up before in my videos, and a lot of people have mentioned that if Fiona really wanted immortality, she should have just gone to see the Countess at the Hotel Cortez while she was in LA. I'm also inclined to believe that Fiona was well aware of the Countess, and she might have even come across her based on the fact that I can see them running in the same types of circles. And it's very possible that as a member of the coven, even before she ascended or during her young ascension, Fiona is very likely to have been in LA or have partied at the Hotel Cortez. So I'm of the belief that they might have actually been aware of each other based on how old the Countess is and how long Fiona has been reigning, and based on her personality type as somebody who likes to get out there and be seen and is virtually a socialite. But I think it could be something that is actually quite peaceful in nature. I think they'd probably both be very respectful of each other for who each other is. Fiona, from the fact that the Countess is this immortal creature, a glorious and beautiful creature, and then the Countess perhaps might have asked Fiona for help retrieving her mortality, or at least trying to get away from James at the hotel. So I actually don't see this being a bad relationship. If I'm going to be honest, I can see it being an 8 out of 10 as far as friendliness goes. Now, how do I think an interaction between Madison and the Countess would go? Now, this is a very interesting one because the Montgomerys and the Countess do have a history with each other. And similarly to Fiona, Madison is from LA, California. It's possible that she would have gone to a party and interacted with the Countess. I think from Madison's perspective, she would have felt some off vibes as a witch, perhaps not being able to put her finger on it. But I do see the Countess being somebody who would likely have been keeping up with Madison's progress in some way, shape, or form. Not as somebody who's obsessive over it, but just as somebody who would be somewhat curious as to what the progeny of Dr. Montgomery is doing, right? Because Dr. Montgomery and the Countess have a very interesting history with each other, and seeing one of his relatives ascend to at least a sort of fame would be something that I think she would find really, at least mildly fascinating. But as I said, Madison, I think she would get really weird vibes. I don't think she'd have a problem voicing those two, but I think she would understand that the Countess is probably not a regular mortal and somebody that she should be very careful around. I would say a 5 out of 10 for their relationship. It's not hostile, but it's not friendly either. I think these are two women who would keep their distance from each other and have very little interaction outside of a couple of social events. Now for the last one, how do I think Michael and the Countess would act if they interacted with each other, came across each other? I think we have some evidence in season 8 when Michael comes to the hotel, and in this scene where he comes in to grab Queenie, Queenie's playing a game with March, and March is actually a bit startled by Michael entering the hotel at will. And I think the Countess would have a similar reaction to Michael, but there's a part of me that thinks they might actually bond over a shared experience. Both Michael and the Countess are alienated people. Neither has many people they can trust or rely on. Now, I do think the Countess would always be a bit cautious toward Michael because, much like the witches, I think she'd be able to understand that there is something off about him, if not understanding who he is entirely. And I do think Michael would be slightly fascinated by the beauty of the Countess because they're both beautiful, awful creatures if you think of them. But they've also been hurt a lot in their long lives, or at least in the Countess's long life, and then in Michael's very short life, they've experienced a lot of similarity. So I think it's entirely possible that they might bond, but I think it would always be something that the Countess is very cautious of pursuing or engaging in. But I also think that the Countess has more to gain from a connection or relationship with Michael than Michael does. But I do think the Countess would make for a very good confidant. But of course, I am very curious to hear what you guys have to say about those 3 interactions. Please leave it in the comments, and I will see you guys in my next video.